Hey, design enthusiasts! Welcome to Next in Line Design, a podcast by the World Design Organization's Young Designers Circle. We're all about embracing a new mindset in design, one that's bold, innovative, and impactful. We're here to connect with the next wave of design talent and explore how you can use your creativity to make a real impact. Get ready for fresh ideas and inspiration from young designers around the world who are reshaping the industry. We're here to spark conversations, inspire change, and explore new ideas in design. But remember, these are just our perspectives on one big, evolving field. Please note that the opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official views of the World Design Organization or its affiliates. Let's dive in and see what's next in line.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Next in Line Design podcast episode. We're very happy to be here with you today. My name is Veronica Albarran. I am an architect and an urbanist from Mexico, and currently I am working in the UK as a research associate on housing.
Hello, and I'm Arjit Singh. You've probably seen me on a couple other episodes before this. I'm a UX designer based out of Toronto, Canada, and I also teach UX-related courses at a college here called George Brown College. We're super excited to have you here today, and in light of the graduation that is happening all over the world for students, we are going to be talking a little bit about portfolios today. So we're super excited to be doing this.
Yeah, and we really spent some time thinking about, what could be useful? Like, what are the things we wish we knew when we graduated, which has been quite a few years ago. And the first thing we want to really talk about is about branding and visual identity. And Arjit, I would like to ask you how we choose the best format for our portfolios.
Yeah, so I think a question that I, sort of talk about quite a bit, actually, from a branding perspective, right? Like, do you want to go for a beautiful portfolio that perhaps does not necessarily hit the mark when it comes to storytelling, or do you want to go storytelling first and keep it more black and white? Personally, I like to, I'm not the person to go full on color mode. So I do like to spend a lot of time sort of refining my story, which I think is a huge piece of it. But then how do you make sure that your own branding or your personal branding, as we call it, is something that comes across as well, right? Because you don't want a portfolio that perhaps somebody else can put their own name on it, and then it blends into their identity. So you need to have some sort of an identity there, and whether you do that through storytelling or aesthetics, I think it just depends on who you are as a person. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree on that. I would also say that it kind of also depends on what the interview process is going to be like, because we talked a little bit about this before, but a beautiful portfolio, like a visually appealing portfolio, will always, or most likely, will take you to the next level of the process of or the interview. But also a beautiful portfolio or an appealing portfolio can only take you so far. And for me, there's like two things. When you talked about the storytelling, yes, it is about the storytelling of who you are as a designer, but it's also about are you going to have the opportunity to present your portfolio to someone else? Then you might want to curate certain type of information, or are you just going to straight be able to present it yourself? So I think the way in which you curate the information also depends on the way in which you will be interacting with your interviewers.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think you brought this up a little bit when we were sort of discussing this episode, right? You said visual fingerprint of who you are as a designer. I think you mentioned that exact thing when we talked about portfolios. So certainly, right, it is something that you have to still have some sort of a branding, but then the storytelling piece, like you're saying, is so important. When you're talking to somebody from the HR perspective, when you're first sending a portfolio in, let's say for somebody to sort of view on an application versus when you're presenting it, are two very, very different things. And I think a lot of people that I've spoken to recently actually have two sets of that. So they'll send one portfolio which can perhaps be an online presence, just to get their foot in the door when people have seen enough and they're interested in understanding a little bit more. And when they get to the sort of quote unquote designers round, talking about the storytelling piece becomes a lot more important then. What is your take on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there are some advantages and this is another topic that we discussed on, like what you put out there as an online portfolio, and then the type of portfolio that you like might not want to have online, and like what are the different elements that make you choose one decision over the other. For me, for example, to be honest, at the time when I was just graduating, portfolios were quite basic. You would have it like online, maybe a couple of pages. So some people would ask you like no more than 10 pages. Like they don't need more than that to assess certain type of like design capabilities, but also your ability to present yourself, the whole like almost like a digital fingerprint of who you are. But then I guess it also depends on your industry, right? Like for me as an architect, maybe 10 pages of what my architectural skills and how they are represented through my design is enough. But for you, with a background in UX, I would assume that an online portfolio has an even bigger impact in the whole process of getting like hired.
Certainly, yeah, and that's something that, of course, has changed over time for me as well. I came from industrial design, and when I graduated too, one of the big things that we talked about quite a bit was, do we send a PDF portfolio or do we have an online portfolio, right? Should we be showing the process? Should we be showing only the pretty images that sort of come out as the final product? Were conversations that we were having all the time, right? Like you're saying, the 10 pages, sort of from a UX standpoint, over the last few years, what I've realized is 4 to 5 case studies that show the most impact, right? Sometimes it's even less. Sometimes it's only 3 case studies, so that the person that's actually looking at these does not have to choose too much, right? So it's an easier choice for them, making sure that you're able to sort of tell or show your skills within those 3 case studies becomes that much more important. So certainly something that I feel like is different for different sort of sectors within design, but they're all in a way similar. Like, how do you show as much as possible with as little as possible, right? So making sure that the quality is there, even if it's 10 pages or 3 case studies.
Yeah, and which I also think it's very important because I think there's this almost myth that you kind of need to have one portfolio and that's it. But the reality is that, you have a variety of abilities that you can show in different ways through your portfolio, and those need to be actually tailored. You do not only need to tailor your CV and send the same portfolio over and over again. You actually also have to tailor your portfolio to the type of like position that you are applying to. Also because when I'm thinking about like some of the architecture portfolios I've seen, they are amazing, but then they're also 50 pages. No one in HR will have the time to go through 50 pages of, I don't know, 100 applications. So like you really need to, again, like use it very strategically, because that's one of the elements that might catch your attention. But then and like another thing that we talked about when talking about portfolios was, yes, maybe like companies may have they will go through the HR departments, but in the end, the person who's gonna like be in an interview with you is actually going to be a designer who like knows specifically what they are talking about. So you also need to take that into consideration, like the different profiles that are going to be looking at your portfolio throughout the process.
Certainly, yeah. And I remember actually when I was interviewing for the last position that I got, I was presenting something, of course, from a UX standpoint, but at the same time, I had my other design portfolio ready on tap, right? So I knew that I had my sort of industrial design portfolio ready if they wanted to see something or if they wanted to sort of talk through process and that sort of thing as well. So really, sometimes it just depends on showcasing the skills, and you don't know what's going to stick with somebody. Certainly important to make sure that you're presenting the portfolio that you think is going to get your foot in the door. Like you're saying, you don't want to just send a 50-page portfolio without giving them any guidance. Now, I think one of the things that I've done in the past too is mentioning to whoever, like, or whatever company I'm applying to, like while I'm sending the entire website, I'm also mentioning, here's a project that I think might be most beneficial for you to look into, right? Because I think, let's say that either I think works with their process, or it seems like it might be something that's more related to that industry, something that I think will stick. And so, either if it's a web portfolio, sending the link particularly to that, so the URL that showcases that particular project, and then of course they can go back and review the rest of it, or mentioning that somewhere, that's a project that they should look into, and perhaps even connecting it to the application, right? Saying, here's why I think this project that I'm telling you to sort of look into is a little bit more beneficial for this application. So certainly guiding people to what you think is most beneficial to them, and what you think is going to stick with them is important. But sometimes you just have to be on your feet, especially when in an interview, right? Because you might want to pull in certain things that you've done in the past. Certainly, I think for both of us, sort of coming from different industries, doing certain different things, always, if a conversation comes up about something, always being ready to pull something in, whether that's a story. And if you have visuals, like we say, it's always good to have visuals. Then having visuals is almost always great. So
yeah,
I think, yeah.
I think you touched on a couple of things that we had also previously discussed, like showing too much versus showing too little. Like when is it appropriate? Which kind of like you already dealt on it, because it depends on who are you pitching to. But also just like in general, you could even use the same assets for your portfolio, but even then, like for different positions that you're applying to, it might be different, the way in which you like do that accompanying narrative of what is the skill set that this is bringing.
100%.
Yeah, I recently was helping a friend like get ready for an interview, and I remember this very specifically because he was applying to a design studio that was focusing on housing, but the like projects that he had working on were stadiums, which is like a totally different scale. And this is another interesting thing, that like when you are curating your portfolio and the type of information you add, for me, the real thing that was going to define his interview was how to make sure that the person who was interviewing him would know of all of these big projects, what did he do, and what are the transferable skills that he can do in a totally different scale in design, which would be, in this case, what are the design principles that he has like developed so far, and how does he apply it to now a different type of like typology of architecture.
Absolutely. I think one of the most essential skills, and so important to be able to showcase sort of with different projects. I've also sort of thought about this quite a bit, which is, when, let's say, you're showing the 3 case studies, as we were talking about earlier, making sure that, you're able to display multiple different things, especially if you have that. If you're maybe more a generalist and you want to, let's say, showcase that you're able to perhaps do, quote unquote, the UX thinking process, or show partly that you've also done research on a certain project, right? If you've, let's say, been doing a lot of freelance work, whatever that might be. So just always having those skills and the way to display those skills, I think is an important piece of that, right? One of the other things, of course, we had talked about briefly was the purpose of the portfolio, right? The purpose of representing some of this work that you're doing. So whether it is to apply to a job, or whether it is to sort of just have an online presence, whatever that might be, can change the way we display this work as well, right? If you're applying for a big corporate, it's different. If you're applying for finding freelance clients, your portfolio might be different, because you're looking to cater to a very different audience. An HR company, an HR sort of environment at an organization might be looking at your portfolio very differently than a freelance client would be. And so I think perhaps a good thing to bring in here is how we've both sort of worked in different sectors, but there's also the research piece that you sort of focus on quite a bit. And then there's the teaching piece with that too. Perhaps a good time to bring those things to light here. How do you think the purpose comes into play when it's displaying that research content that you have done that research from an architectural standpoint, perhaps, because it's not pretty work always, right? But it is such an important piece and can be so important for somebody like you that's applying to more research-based positions.
Yeah. And I think like definitely when I made this transition from like industry to actual research, I didn't realize that in research they sometimes also ask you for a portfolio.
Right.
And again, it's kind of what you say, the purpose is very different, because whilst when I was like an architect or an urban consultant, the type of skill set I was showing were, my capacity to like design, or my capacity to like understand data, map data, make it like basically like through visual methods represent like very complex data and then do decision making. Then it turns out that in research is something very different, which is how do you easily communicate very complex research to all different types of stakeholders. And the thing is, a lot of times that is also done visually, which is the reason why sometimes they also ask you either to what I would call, they call them presentations, but realistically they are just very tailored portfolios on a specific skill set that they are looking for you to have as a researcher, or just like the ways in which you can visually communicate complex research to, again, it can be the general public, to investors, to the government, etc. But like, I would actually like to know your intake, what your like insight is, sorry, on like maybe curating portfolio for more like teaching, for example.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's similar to what you're saying, right? And I think one of the things that we had discussed was around this thing about like how design terminology and methodologies are not perhaps as important to people that are corporate, right? Especially, let's say somebody in a startup environment is looking for you to just get stuff done, right? They're not really looking for you to present the entire design thinking process or whatever else that might be. But then when you're sort of applying to more teaching gigs or places where the research again is important, it becomes a very different conversation, right? And you have to sort of maybe even talk about the process, not just show the process, right? So writing becomes that much more important. I think for me, one of the things that I've done in my portfolio is just show the style that I teach in, perhaps talk a little bit about the classes that I teach, talking about the pedagogy, but also the sort of stuff that I have done with students in the past to showcase sort of the type of work that I do there, which becomes so important, because at the end of the day, when somebody is looking into my capability from that perspective, it's very different from, can this person design, right? While it's not necessarily management directly, there are aspects of management or managing a class, right? Managing a project, because when we're working with partners or external partners for the class, the idea is not just to say that we're going to be able to create this deliverable for you, but the idea is also to make sure that we're going to be able to communicate that throughout the semester. So it becomes that much more important to sort of showcase that stuff in more detail, right? And while that might not necessarily be something that comes through directly in portfolios, it is something that has to come through when you're having that conversation with somebody that's perhaps looking to hire you for a similar role to that. So whether it's a teaching assistant role, whether it's something that's a little bit more advanced to that, it is something that becomes so much more important, because not only are you trying to display your own process, but you want to make sure that they understand that you're going to be able to teach this process in the future to the people that are relying on you per se to understand this.
Yeah, which again, it is part of the like whole storytelling process, like those bits and pieces that perhaps you don't necessarily like like adequate in your portfolio, but yes, in the narrative of how you present your portfolio. And like for me, something interesting is that at least in Mexico, when you're applying for a job as an architecture like lecturer, they actually ask you for your portfolio, which
Oh,
I found that like very interesting, because I would not think that that's something they've necessarily asked for, but they
right.
still want to know your own skills as a like in industry,
Absolutely.
and how you can like transfer that.
Yeah, and one of the things, of course, to that point here, currently, at least in the teaching role that I have, is it's a part-time role, right? And a lot of people that are teaching within the college are a lot of part-time people. So their full-time gigs might necessarily be something around delivering stuff in the industry, right? Which is a very different skill again than teaching is. And so making sure that they have those skills to be able to bring those to the students is that much more important, because when you're sort of in a university, I think it's a little bit different where you're very focused on the academia, but when you are sort of teaching more deliverable based classes, you have to make sure that the person that's teaching them sort of has those as well. So certainly something that becomes so much more important when it comes to that. So I think this conversation is really taking us to a place where I think we probably might want to end this too, is like industry specific portfolios, right? So I guess the question for you is, how have our portfolios, you think, or your portfolio changed as we've navigated these different sectors and industries? Or how do you really think about your portfolio when you think about all of these different industries that you want to apply to? Perhaps there's a tips or lessons learned type thing that we go into from here.
Oh my God. Well, definitely for those who well, I guess this is for new graduates, but maybe this is a shout out to people in our generation. Take down your portfolios that you like added online 10 years ago, because people are going to look at your name and they're going to find what you did 10 years ago, which is a very different skill set to what you have
Absolutely.
learned over a decade. So
Absolutely.
that's just one. But just another one, which would be really take the portfolio seriously. Like I feel, at least when I was graduating, I just I just did it because later on I learned on the importance of it. But then also, I think as you progress, you will realize that, as I told you, like every time, at least for me, the portfolio is less important, because like you start building a name for yourself. But at the beginning, it is your fingerprint, and in this day and age, it is your digital fingerprint. So it is very, very important to have it there curated, but also again, when online, having it in a way where you show very visually your skills, because in the end, a lot of design is about visuals, or it's linked to visuals. But also think about it in a way, in which you know that people are not necessarily going to be able to talk about you, or sorry, to talk to you about what's in the portfolio, because I see a lot of these like really beautifully curated portfolios online with not one word. I have absolutely no idea what this is about. So yeah, just that would be my tip. What about you, Arjit?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends company to company, industry to industry too. But the storytelling piece does become that important piece. I believe while it's important to make sure that you have some catered stuff to the particular industry that you're applying to, a lot of times it's just about saying that you have the transferable skills that I think we touched on earlier too, right? So I think one of the quotes that I guess comes from the research that we were doing for this, or what you said essentially, is the best feedback that you got was from someone outside of your industry, right? And someone that wasn't an expert in the field. So just being able to say that, one, inspiration can be found anywhere, and two, like you're able to display your skills even if it's not a project that is in that particular industry. Um,
Yeah.
Perhaps you want to touch on that quote. Tell us who said that and where that comes from.
Oh yeah. So the biggest piece of presentation I've ever had to deliver was my PhD Viva examination. And it was a very complex topic. It was phenomenology, human geography, etc. And I pitched my presentation which was again very visual, almost like a portfolio to my similar in terms of like how it is displayed, to my mom. And after speaking for 15 minutes, she told me, I have absolutely no idea what you've been doing the last 3 years. I do not understand. And that just showed me that maybe the visuals were right, but my way of talking about the like my supporting material was not. Needless to say, I spent the next 2 days refining and refining until I couldn't speak anymore. But that's the thing. Like sometimes the person who can give you the best feedback on how you tell this story about like who you are as a designer or what your work is, or the work you've been developing is, might be, someone who has, because if someone who has absolutely no background can understand, then someone who has a background can very easily understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think like keeping it, simple, keeping it, again, I think as we say it in layman's terms, just to make sure that anybody that's looking at this can understand it, right? I think it goes back to like, there's going to be different audiences for your portfolios. And while you might be able to have multiple portfolios, sometimes that's just not the case, right? You just don't have the time or the chance perhaps to create two portfolios. And so making sure that what you do have out there is not technical jargon at all times, right? Because a lot of times people that are looking at this portfolio might not be experts in the field, right? Might not be experts in the particular industry that you're applying to. And so making sure that people understand the process, people understand the storytelling, even without understanding that technical jargon becomes that much more important.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're at the beginning of your career, you want to I would believe that you are maybe still in the process of exploring like what your career path, what your ambitions as a designer are. So you kind of want to keep it broad, right? So you want to talk in a way that anyone could understand. Like that's why they say, again, bringing like this research background, they always tell us like, find the 100 most used words in English, and then and you actually explain your research with those 100 words. Because I think those 100 words, a 5-year-old can understand them if you like present an idea. So yeah, just like that, do something that's like very accessible for people to understand, from the like HR department to an actual specialist on the topic, or like the research or the design themes that interest you or that you are like applying to.
Right. Yeah, and Veronica, I mean, I know we're sort of coming up on time here. One last thing that I want to talk about here is going into becoming an IC or an individual contributor for long term versus going into managing. We're both sort of at a stage where we're sort of continuing to think about where our careers are going to go. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be thinking about this as they're graduating, sort of thinking about, of course, like how they're going to grow in design in the future. A lot of people do think about like, they want to create this product, but there is also a lot of people that want to say that they want to manage a team. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I would say that for me, like architecture is a passion. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, I want to be drawing until the last day. Like architecture is just something that, I can't put it in words. It's something that I absolutely love.
Right.
And urbanism as well. But as I have like developed in my career, I realized that all paths have ended in management, even research. Like even what I'm doing at the moment I'm not conducting the research. I am like helping like stakeholders deliver research together. But the thing is that, well, I guess like a simple of an idea as it is, that to manage research, you actually have to know the process of like designing research to, like manage the project. You should have also like gone through the process of understanding how to, like properly design. But in the end, I would say just find time to do those things that you like. Like for me, again, all career paths have led me through like to management in the end. But I do still sometimes miss just, going into AutoCAD and drawing something or having a piece of paper and start like doing a draft or something that's in my mind. And just, I just think you need to pursue your development, but as well the things that are important to you that might not necessarily like all the time go like aligned to another. It's just finding the time management to do so. What about you, Arjit?
Right. I think just like you're right, like, and I don't want to take too much time here sort of because I'll be echoing what you're saying, but really making sure that you're spending some time feeding that creativity that you, got into the field for, the passion that you have for design is important, right? Whether you're gaining inspiration from other places and sort of putting that together, even for your personal self or doing more artistic projects, is important to be able to still feed that information to other places. I think this is a thing that we talked about on another episode here when we talked about the education piece. It's just like, when you're in a boat with these people that you're teaching, you might not necessarily know or have all the answers, but you want to be able to say that, we're going to do this together, and we're going to get our hands dirty together, right? We're going to try to do our best to find the answers together. So absolutely. And that only comes with trying different things, making sure that you are not afraid to try all sorts of things that you're gonna fail at, right? That you're going to do not as good as you thought you could as well. So absolutely an essential thing. This has been amazing, Veronica. I don't want to take too much of our time here. Again, this has been an absolute pleasure. Super excited to be able to do this with you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Arjit. Like this has allowed me to learn even more about the type of things you do and a lot more about UX design, which is something like I rarely think about.
Right. Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Veronica. To everybody that's listening, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are, of course, Next in Line Design, podcast hosted by the young designers at the World Design Organization. We'll be looking forward to having more such conversations in the future, and we hope and wish you a happy graduation.
Yeah, happy graduation, everyone.
Next in Line Design is a podcast for designers by young designers. We hope that you really enjoyed today's episode. We've got some really exciting conversations coming up that we can't wait to share with you. Every episode, you're going to have the chance to meet a new member of the YDC. So enjoy our rotating cast of designers and feel free to reach out in the comments just to say hey, maybe to share some feedback, your story, or tell us more about the kind of conversations that you'd like to be hearing. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe to the WDO's channels and hit that notification bell so that you never miss an episode. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you back here soon with more of Next in Line Design.